Welcome to this explainer. Take a breath with me for just a second and kind of clear your mind. Today, we're going to embark on a structural inquiry into something that's profoundly human yet deeply philosophical, and that is how we leave legacies. We typically think of records as these simple containers, right? Like vessels that are designed to lock away a piece of the past and carry it safely across time. But what if that perspective is actually preventing our history from surviving? What if a record shouldn't be a container at all, but rather a contact surface, an interface through which someone in the future can actually observe the world again? Let's take a quiet, contemplative walk through the structure of living inheritance. So think about this. What are we actually trying to leave to the future? Is it just information, just a static pile of facts, dates, and conclusions? Or is it an entrance from which thought can begin again? I really want you to question your basic assumptions about human memory and archiving here. We spend so much energy trying to freeze time, don't we? Trying to capture exactly what happened so the future won't forget. But if all we leave behind is a closed door of settled information, the future has nowhere to go. I mean, they can look at the door, but they absolutely cannot walk through it. Okay, let's dive into this. We are currently preserving more than ever before in human history. I mean, we've got vast servers filled with documents, high-definition photographs, and endless videos. We record our institutions, our software code, our revision histories, and now even our daily dialogues with artificial intelligence. Humanity is literally generating quintillions of bytes of data every single day. Our preservation technologies are absolute marvels. We can retain a massive, unimaginable amount of information. But here is the central paradox we really need to unpack. More preserved information doesn't necessarily create greater understanding. In fact, sometimes the more data we hoard, the less the future can actually comprehend what it all meant. To understand why more data doesn't automatically equal more understanding, we really have to look at what vanishes. Because even when a physical or digital record perfectly survives, like a document, a line of code, or a video, what disappears is almost everything that actually gave it meaning. The invisible observational conditions just evaporate. We lose why it was preserved in the first place. We lose what the people writing it feared. We lose the moments where they hesitated. And perhaps most importantly, we lose the possibilities they didn't choose. Just think about the difference between finding an old printed historical document and exploring a modern software codebase that retains all of its commit history and developer notes. The printed document gives you the final answer, sure, but the codebase? That shows you the arguments, the bugs, the abandoned features, and the whole human context behind the code. Words and institutions begin distancing themselves from their original context the exact second they're saved. What sinks to the bottom of the ocean of time is the movement, the urgency, and the reality of the observers themselves. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. Under what we call the fixed record model, a past event is turned into a record, it's assigned a fixed meaning, and then it's used simply as a reference in the future. This is kind of the traditional way we think about archiving. But treating a record as a completed answer turns it into a dead end. In this model, the future can only receive a meaning that was already entirely determined by the past. It basically becomes a rigid, fossilized object. It literally cannot interact with the reality of a new era because it leaves absolutely no room for the future to breathe its own context into it. Let's move to and see how this builds into something entirely different. Consider the concept of living inheritance. Notice how the steps flow here. It starts with a past observation, which then becomes a record. But crucially, the very next step integrates context, history, and uncertainty. Preserving that uncertainty is what allows for contact with the future, which then leads to reinterpretation. That sparks renewed observation and finally a completely new question. This is the core thesis right here. True inheritance isn't about transporting some unchanged meaning across centuries. It is about transferring the conditions through which meaning can be generated again. It's like an unbroken chain of human and systemic resonance. To make this crystal clear, a fixed record preserves a past meaning. A reinterpretable record, on the other hand, allows meaning to restart in the future. Now, I need to be very precise here. Reinterpretation does not mean casually rewriting history or distorting the past to fit whatever narrative we happen to want today. Not at all. Reinterpretation is the essential movement through which a record from another time acts as a contact surface to touch reality once more. If a record can't be reinterpreted, it's just a fixed object, even if it's perfectly preserved. To pass a genuine question forward, we have to leave the record open enough to be read anew. So how do we actually build these reinterpretable records? Well, there are exact structural rules we must follow. We must preserve the original record, obviously, but we also have to retain the revision history.
We must rigorously distinguish facts from interpretations. We have to keep uncertainty visible, like we really shouldn't hide what we didn't know. We should try to preserve the unchosen possibilities, the paths we walked away from. And above all, we must maintain a clear path back to the source. Reinterpretability means fluidity, yes, for sure, but it always requires the possibility of return. It's fundamentally an architecture of transparency.
Why is this philosophy so urgent right now? Well, in the age of AI, the dynamics of preservation are shifting incredibly fast. In the very near future, things like text, images, video, code, and automated decisions, they're going to be wildly abundant. AI can generate these instantly. What will become incredibly scarce are things like context, origin, the boundaries of human judgment, the uncertainty we felt, the disagreement in the room, and the residual questions we just couldn't answer. As AI begins reading our records in the future to generate its own conclusions, handing it just our completed, fixed answers won't be enough. The AI will desperately need access to the trajectory, the friction, and the unresolved questions behind a record to actually generate profound understanding.
So the crucial point is this beautiful phase transition. We are moving from a mindset of merely preserving answers to a mindset of preserving possibilities. We must not close the future by enforcing past conclusions. We have to pass questions forward. We must leave records that allow questions to move again. In broader philosophical terms, this is a shift from the first spiral, which is a phase of development that simply asks what should be left to the future, to the second spiral, a more advanced phase which asks how can what remains actually reconnect with the future. It completely closes the loop of living inheritance.
I want to leave you with a final thought. When a record is opened in the future, does it awaken a past meaning or a question we have yet to discover? Think about the emails you write, the documents you draft, the history we curate. Are we just building a museum of dead conclusions? Or are we designing entrances for the future to step through so they can look at their own world with a clarity we made possible? I'll let you sit with that. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer.